This is the real footage taken just 1 minute before a diver's death. At the time, he was inside a water-filled underground cave, trying to recover a body that had been lost for 10 years. As soon as he cleared away the mud, the corpse suddenly shot upward, half of its skull-like face pressing against his own. Terrified, the diver's soul seemed to leave his body. This chilling scene is said to be the true story behind the popular game, Dave the Diver. In the northern Cape Province, part of the Kalahari Desert, there lies a massive sinkhole that looks like a dark, deep eye set in the earth. Inside is a cliff more than 50 meters high, and at the bottom, a small pond covered with green duckweed. From the surface, it seems ordinary, but beneath the plants lies a giant bell-shaped cave filled with water, reaching a depth of 283 meters. This is where our story takes place, Bushman's Hole. On October 28, 2004, a diving enthusiast flew in from Hong Kong. He was the main character of this story, Dave Shaw, the real-life inspiration behind the game, Dave the Diver. Dave was an Australian, 50 years old, and since 1989, he had worked as a pilot for Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong, where he lived with his wife and 2 children. During those years, he discovered diving and quickly became fascinated, especially with cave diving. Through friends, he learned about Bushman's Hole in South Africa, a place no one had ever reached the bottom of before. Determined to take on the challenge, Dave made the dive, and after 9 hours and 40 minutes, he succeeded. Not only did he set a cave diving record of 270 meters, he also broke 4 other world records, all within just 5 years of starting the sport. But during that record-breaking dive, Dave stumbled upon something shocking: the body of a diver. Later, he learned the man's name was Dion Dreyer, a South African who had died there on December 17, 1994. Dion had been diving with friends when, at about 50 meters on the way back up, he lost consciousness and sank to the bottom. Rescue teams at the time searched, but never found his body, limited by the technology of that era. Now, 10 years later, Dave had discovered him by accident. According to Dave, Dion's diving suit was still mostly intact, but his regulator was gone, and his face and hands had turned completely into bone. When Dave surfaced, he had already made up his mind to bring Dion's body back. He then reached out to Dion's parents, and of course they agreed. Before leaving, Dave promised them he would return their son. After that, he began preparing, training while also assembling a team. Since there were no body bags available for purchase, he asked his wife to sew one, and to make sure he knew how to use it properly, Dave repeatedly practiced climbing into the bag himself, quickly realizing that this was not something to take lightly. After more than 2 months of preparation, Dave and his team returned to Bushman's Hole, accompanied by Dion's parents. To ensure success, the operation was massive. No fewer than 11 divers would enter the water, supported by additional resource divers, logistics staff, and medical teams, complete with an emergency room and decompression chamber. Everything was set up as if nothing could go wrong. The mission commander was Verna van Schaik, a woman who at the time held the world record for the deepest female dive. To document and publicize the effort, not only did the team plan to film the entire operation themselves, but they also invited media outlets to broadcast it live. The entire team was divided into 9 groups, with logistics and medical crews stationed on the surface while the rest worked underwater. The plan was carefully designed as a relay. Dave would dive alone first, place Dion's body into the bag, and bring it up to 220 meters, where his friend Don would be waiting. Dave would then begin his own decompression ascent, while Don carried the body up to 150 meters to hand it off to the third diver, Mark Dusson. At 120 meters, Mark would pass it to the fourth group, Peter and Lowe. From there, at 80 meters, the body would go to the fifth diver, Stephen, who would then pass it at 40 meters to Toon in the sixth group. platoon would bring it up to 20 meters and hand it off to the 7th team. Step by step, like a baton in a relay race, the divers planned to move the body safely to the surface. It might sound complicated, but the hardest part of the mission wasn't the handoffs. It was the long, exhausting decompression process. In simple terms, decompression means that as a diver rises, they must stop at different depths for set periods of time to slowly release the gases dissolved in their body. The deeper you dive and the longer you stay down, the longer the decompression will take. For example, when Dave dove to 271 meters, it only took him 17 minutes to get down, but his decompression on the way up lasted 12 hours. If he spent more than the planned 5 minutes bagging the body, his decompression time would increase even further. And since the other divers were waiting for him, their schedules would also be pushed back, making everyone's risk climb higher together. That's why the pressure on Dave was enormous. When bagging the body, every second counted. The day before the recovery began, he even held a meeting to warn the team. He told them that the most important person in a dive is yourself. If something goes wrong, you must take care of your own problem and not worry about him. If he failed to bring the body up, they were not to wait for him. Just leave him there. He said he had no interest in anyone risking their life to recover his corpse. In his words, losing one diver is better than losing two. At the time, no one realized his warning would turn out to be a chilling prophecy. On January 8, 2005, the recovery mission officially began. Dave was the first to dive, following the guide rope that had been set up earlier. It was his 333rd dive, and tragically, it would also be his last. According to the plan, he would reach the bottom in about 17 minutes. 13 minutes after Dave entered the water, his teammate Don from the second group began his descent, aiming for a depth of 220 meters. If everything went as expected, Don would arrive there in 7 minutes and meet Dave as he came back up. Don followed the guide rope smoothly to 220 meters, but he didn't see Dave. Looking into the pitch-black depths below, he noticed what seemed like a flickering light. Unsure of what it meant, he decided to wait. But after 2 minutes, Dave still hadn't appeared, and the flickering light below had stopped moving. Don realized that Dave might be in trouble, so he decided to go down and check, even though this went against the safety rules they had all agreed on. When he reached about 250 meters, a sudden dull explosion echoed through the water. Don checked his gear and discovered that one of the components in his regulator had burst under the pressure. This meant he now had to manually add oxygen to his system. In that condition, not only could he no longer help Dave, but he could actually put them both in danger if he tried. Reluctantly, Don had no choice but to abandon the dive and begin ascending. Meanwhile, at 150 meters, the third group, Mark and Dusan, were waiting, but neither Dave nor Don appeared. They saw a faint light below, but only one, and they couldn't tell if it belonged to Dave or Don. They waited for 5 minutes, but when the 6th minute passed with no sign of either diver, they were forced to leave. Their gas supply and safety rules left them no other option, so they began their ascent. As Mark and Dusan ascended to 100 meters, they encountered the fourth group heading down. Mark quickly used his writing slate to explain the situation below, and the four of them then began rising together. When they reached 30 meters for decompression, the slate was passed to support divers who carried it to the surface. The message immediately disrupted the original dive schedule, and Mission Commander Verna decided to send the 5th diver, Steven, down to investigate. After passing several divers still decompressing, Steven reached 80 meters and spotted someone. It was Dawn. Dawn handed him a slate that read, "Dave is not coming back." Realizing how important this was, Steven skipped his decompression stops, hurried straight to the surface, and delivered the slate to the team on land. At the same time, Dawn was ascending and reached about 46 meters. Because he had gone 30 meters deeper than planned and was now rising too quickly, the symptoms of decompression sickness began to hit him. He felt sharp headaches, dizziness, and intense pain in his inner ear, and soon his whole body started spinning out of control. At one point, he nearly lost hold of the guide rope. For a moment, he thought that maybe this was exactly how Dion had sunk to the bottom 10 years earlier. On the surface, the team already knew that Dawn was alive but feared Dave was lost. There was no time for grief. Keeping Dawn safe became the priority. Verna sent down the 6th diver, Toon, to help. At 40 meters, Toon found Dawn in terrible shape, suffering from severe stomach pain and vomiting, any of which could have caused him to choke. Toon immediately assisted him upward while continuing decompression. Other divers also joined in to help, handing Dawn off in stages. After more than 11 hours in the water, Dawn finally completed decompression and was rushed into a chamber for treatment. After all this, the team held a brief memorial for Dave before slowly leaving the site. No one talked anymore about recovering Dion's or Dave's body. What had started as a large and highly publicized mission ended with yet another life lost. When the news broke, many people questioned the purpose of the operation, asking why they had taken such risks and what the point was. And just as the public debate was heating up, another shocking piece of news emerged. 3 days after Dave's death, on January 12, 2005, team members Peter and Patris re-entered Bushman's Hole to retrieve the gas cylinders left inside. As they were gathering the cylinders at around 50 meters, they suddenly noticed an extra rope nearby. Inside the cave, there should have been only the guide rope they had laid, so this made no sense. Curious, Patris tugged on it to see where it led. To their horror, 2 figures drifted out of the darkness. Both divers froze in shock, their hearts racing, because one of the faces was nothing but a ghastly skull. After a long, terrifying moment, they steadied themselves and shined their lights closer. What they saw made their blood run cold. 2 bodies, tied together on the same rope, suspended motionless in the black water. One had only half a skull for a face, while the other was bloated. But from the features and the gear, they quickly realized it was Dave, the diver who had died just 3 days earlier. The 2 men must have had nerves of steel. Most people would have been paralyzed with fear. They quickly surfaced to report what they had found, then went back down and brought the bodies up. After the autopsy and a review of the footage from the camera mounted on Dave's head, the team finally learned what had happened underwater. Dave's descent to the bottom had gone smoothly, and he began clearing the silt from Dion's body. Before the dive, experts had assured him that after so many years, only bones would remain, which meant the body would not float. But they were wrong. At 270 meters, in a low-oxygen environment, anaerobic bacteria had broken down Dion's body fat and turned it into a waxy, soap-like substance known as adipocere. This substance formed a hard shell around the body, preserving organs, tissues, and gases inside, almost like a mummy. Dion's exposed face and hands had become bone, which had led both Dave and the experts to misjudge the situation. Because adipocere is less dense than water, and trapped gases inside added buoyancy, once Dave removed the silt, the body suddenly floated upward. According to people who later watched the full video, the moment the body floated up, Dion's skull-like face lunged directly against Dave's mask, catching him completely off guard. Things quickly got worse. Normally, Dave kept his dive light clipped near his neck, but because he'd strapped a camera to his head, the light's position was affected and he had to hold it by hand. While clearing the silt, he had set the light on the ground for illumination. When the body rose, a piece of rope tangled around Dave's dive knife. He pulled out scissors to cut it, but shaken and panicked, he failed several times. To make matters worse, his Mk15.5 rebreather allowed him only about 5 minutes at that depth. Fear turned into desperation, his breathing quickened, and carbon dioxide built up faster than the system could filter. He slipped into hypercapnia, also known as carbon dioxide poisoning. On the recording, he can be heard letting out 2 painful groans before his breathing stopped. Dave died slowly, in terror and agony. But the story didn't end there. Because Dave and Dion had become tangled in the same rope, Dion's buoyant body slowly dragged Dave upward. When they reached about 50 meters, the 2 bodies achieved neutral buoyancy and remained suspended together, motionless in the dark, until Peter and the others discovered them. That mysterious extra rope the divers had seen was actually the other end of Dave's guideline. At the bottom, while clearing the silt, Dave had tied it to himself so he wouldn't lose his way back. After death, as the bodies floated up, the rope was pulled along with them, creating the eerie scene the others encountered. In a strange way, Dave did fulfill his promise. He brought Dion's body out of the cave. But looked at another way, it seemed as if Dion had brought Dave out. Or perhaps they had pulled each other. That uncanny coincidence is hard not to dwell on. This is the story of diver Dave Shaw. Many people question the point of such dangerous dives, but perhaps Dave explained it best himself in a documentary. The secret to happy diving is to stay warm, and the secret to safe diving is not to dive at all. Yet he and others kept going back, again and again. In other words, he knew the risks, but that was exactly why he wanted to do it. That may be the true mindset of explorers.